It is 1 o'clock. I'm going to give it a couple of minutes, but I just wanted to thank everybody who's already arrived. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, we'll wait until about 3 after. I think this is going to be a short meeting, and an exciting one. Okay, it's 3 after. Welcome to all of our members. I'm hoping we're going to have a quorum. We really need that today because this is a really important meeting. So I'd like to call this meeting to order as chair, and I'll turn to Mary Claire to do our roll call.
Hey, everybody, just let me know that you're here. Dr. Buttress is here. Representative Richard Bennett. Senator Hobb Bryan. Senator Nicole Boyd.
Here.
Miss Kay Carr. Miss Miranda Carter. Dr. Daniel Edney. Representative Kevin Felsher. Dr. Tanya Fitz. Dr. Heather Hanna, I know she's not going to be here today. Miss Biz Harris. Dr. Carlin Hennington. Senator Chris Johnson. Miss Leslie Junkin.
I'm here.
Dr. Sophia Leggett. Senator Tyler McCon.
He's going to be here in just a little bit.
Right there, we got him. Representative Sam Mims is here. Dr. Denise Powell,
Here.
Representative John Reed, Dr. Courtney Walker, Mr.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, got you. And Mr. Keith Van Cannon.
Here.
So I'm gonna go over these one more time. We're at 9. Representative Richard Bennett, Senator Hob Bryan, Miss Kay Carr, Miss Miranda Carter, Representative Kevin Felcher, Dr. Tanya Fitz, Miss Biz Harris, Dr. Carlin Hennington, Senator Chris Johnson, Dr. Sophia Leggett, and Representative John Reed. Okay, we'll call out our advisors. Dr. Julie Parker,
Here.
Dr. Kenya Elizabeth Wolf, Miss Penny Manzel, Dr. Catherine Cassidy,
Here.
Dr. LaShonda Carson,
Here.
Dr. Candace Carter Stevens, Dr. William Brown, Miss Sarah Myers,
Here.
and Mr. Cody Smith. Okay. We do not have a quorum yet.
We do not have a quorum.
Biz Harris is here.
that's
Okay,
great.
thank you. We
need
need
one
one
more.
more.
Carlin Hennington is here.
You got it.
Oh, we've got it. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you.
All right.
Oh, and Dr. Fitz, I just saw her. She is here. So that's 12. So we're good.
Perfect. And if any others arrive, please let us know that you were here so we can have that. Okay, so I'd like to now ask for approval of our November 6th meeting minutes. I hope everybody's had an opportunity to review them. Is there a motion for approval from our task force committee members? For
Motion to approve.
Seconded by Biz Harris.
Senator Boyd made the motion and Biz Harris the second. Thank you so much. Okay, while we're on this topic, I'm going to ask our task force permission for me to be able to review and approve the last set of minutes. Those are the minutes of today, since we won't have another meeting and we need that for completion. So if I may, can we please call that for a vote? And will you just go through our members or I guess we could just have a, thumbs up, if you will, for that, or if you have any concerns, let me know. They're all putting their thumbs up? Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. I will review the minutes and sign them for the record. Okay, so our only task at hand other than that is to review the task force report draft. And this is essentially the final draft. Hopefully, I know Mary Claire sent it last week, right before Thanksgiving weekend, and then she also sent it this morning. So there's some highlights on it, and those are where the changes were made after the last meeting. So would you all please speak up now if you have any questions about any of the changes? Just unmute and and say the word if you have any questions or concerns or anything, any kind of additions.
Dr. Buttress, I've got just three comments whenever you'll allow me.
Go ahead, Cody.
So the first, and two of them shouldn't be substantive. It's just questions for our own interest. On page 24, and this are some comments on one of the previous versions. On page 24, it states that it is often difficult for an independent service provider to obtain a Medicaid provider number. Though this isn't a recommendation of the committee, that statement, we wouldn't mind getting more information to see what issues going on. I know that's not substantive to this report, but if there's a little secondary issues, we wouldn't mind learning more, trying to address them. So if y'all could get me some information on that, we can see if we have certain policies causing provider angst with that. Then on page, let's see, page 30, no, not page 30, page 31 about the bundling of CPT codes. I wouldn't mind looking during y'all's research, if y'all can get me a little bit more information on that, especially what the codes they're using for the bundled rates in those other states. Medicaid wouldn't mind looking at some of that before we can say whether or not this is advisable policy. I know that there'll still be a recommendation of the task force, but we wouldn't mind a little bit more information to research the feasibility on all of that. And then there's one, I'm trying to find it. It's on the bank. Let's see. There's a provision in here about it is on page 27. I really don't know how this bank between the Department of Health and Division of Medicaid would look like, really. One of the concerns that I would have is utilization of Medicaid funds for non-Medicaid service, which I don't believe we'll have the authority to do under federal law. So it just says that we would work with the Department of Health to determine the total amount of funding needed. I don't know what role we would play in that, but I do know the utilization of Medicaid funds for non-Medicaid service that could cause compliance issues with the state of Mississippi and the federal government. So depending on how y'all are wanting to do that recommendation, I think it does need to be carefully thought out what role the Division of Medicaid can play in that, just to make sure we stay in compliance.
Understood. I think one of the questions was that due to some of the difficulties that medical providers were having in accessing early intervention services for all the various reasons we've discussed, that there were many times when pediatricians would make referral to specific speech or OT providers in that birth to 3 population. So essentially, those young children were receiving interventional services, but they weren't per se early intervention services. And so I think we were having a little difficulty figuring out how much money really is being spent on those children who are birth to 3 who need early intervention services. And I think that's kind of where we were coming from. Dr. Edney, I don't know if you have any other comments or if any other task force member has any comments about that. We certainly understand not using Medicaid funds inappropriately.
Well, absolutely. I appreciate Cody's comments, but believe me, no one's going to be more concerned about federal compliance of spending money than I am. We have a long track record of having multiple funding sources for different programs and making sure that funding sources go where they're supposed to go and having the appropriate accountability in place to demonstrate compliance.
So Dr. Edney, when it says reimbursing service providers on the front end, will y'all be ensuring that those individuals are enrolled in Medicaid, or how would that look like, paying on the front end?
The pay and chase model, which is used in other states, uses a central bank to pay providers for approved services that are recognized by the program on the front end, so that they're not spending 6 months chasing reimbursement that oftentimes is below market rate anyway. And when we pay that invoice after we demonstrate that the service has been provided in a compliant fashion, then we are the ones who are doing the billing and collecting, and whatever we bill and collect Medicaid for a Medicaid patient goes back into the bank to reimburse the bank for the expenditure on the front end. And that would be true also for those children without coverage, or if there's an approved service that Medicaid refuses to pay, then the bank would pay that, and then the grant for the payer of last resort would reimburse the bank.
So is the Department of Health acting more of a pass-through with the division? of
Not a
funds?
pass-through. No, it's a centralized funding source that, I mean, it's not a new model. So this is,
'Cause I know we pay y'all a month per member per month, per member per month rate on some of the case management service and early intervention for our bennies. Is this bank currently being operated to where Medicaid
No.
funds are going into that and then going to provide?
no, we're talking about a pay and chase for provider services. And, you know, the case management services is a different issue. But this eliminates a major problem with access to care for the kids and getting providers willing to serve the program, because we eliminate this huge hurdle that I don't have the power in. And I mean, if we pass statute to make us, you know, reduce that time window, you're just forcing me into non-compliance, because there's just things I cannot fix.
Right.
The things I can fix, I'll fix.
Right. I think, so Cody, the issue, I know you came unfortunately into this committee late, this task force late. One of the overriding issues that allied health professionals were having in giving and staying whole in providing early intervention services was that they were having to first bill insurance, then bill Medicaid, and then bill the health department. So the health department early intervention funds were a payer of last resort. They're supposed to first do all that other billing. So sometimes the providers were waiting up to maybe even 6 months to get paid. And so what we're trying to do is make it more seamless for them and have the billing be done by the health department, whether it's to private insurance or to Medicaid, or if the health department has to end up doing that payer of last resort.
Because Dr. Buttress, that last step of payer last resort, there are federal regulations with the grant that we had to be in compliance with to demonstrate
Right.
that the provider did all the, that
Right.
takes more time.
Right,
Pay and chase eliminates all that.
right.
And
It sounds like there's really not any intent to use Medicaid funds in this quote unquote bank. Would it be would it be easier to understand and just less confusion if we strike with the Mississippi Division of Medicaid to where it would read, if MSDH selects to move forward with the pay and chase model, it should work to determine the total amount of funding needed to establish a bank for reimbursing service providers on the front end? Because it sounds like this bank is being made up mostly of, it's not Medicaid funds.
you know, it's
being
going to have,
used in this-
Medicaid will be, basically, we become the billing and collecting agent for all the providers.
So how
And
does the money go in on the front end? How do you pay a provider on the front end on this?
you tell me,
With Medicaid funds?
how's the bank funded? It won't be with Medicaid funds. The initial funding of the bank will have to come from the state.
So if we take out with the Mississippi Division of Medicaid from that sentence, I see that pretty much making it, like, it does not lead to any confusion of whether or not Medicaid, like, it's the recommendation of this committee that Medicaid funds be used on the front end with this bank. So
Yeah,
I think
we're not
striking out
asking for that.
those words would save a lot of confusion.
I'm not sure, because again, the issue was that the health department needs to know about how to make this work, how much money they need to have on the front end. So the work with Medicaid is that the predominant amount, by far and away, the largest number of children who receive services from birth to 3 have Medicaid. And so we know how much money comes from Medicaid if they went through our First Steps program. But if they did not, if they were that birth to 3 population where the providers, the medical providers had lost faith in early intervention, so we're no longer referring to early intervention, then we don't know how much was expended on those services, OT, PT, speech therapy. We know case management if they were enrolled in early intervention services. So I think we're talking about 2 different topics, and maybe, I don't know, Mary Claire, do you have any suggestion for wordsmithing there, or does anybody else in the task force? I understand where you're coming from, but I think we're talking about 2 different issues. Dr. Edney needs to know how much money he's going to need to have bank to be able to pay providers. To be able to do that, we're going to have to know those additional funds that Medicaid paid out to allied health professionals that was not part of the early intervention services. So that's part of the future we hope for, is to, as we move along in this next year, our recommendation is to be able to research that a little bit further. We've done a ton of research. Emily, Mary Claire, and our team task force members have done a ton of research looking at how other early intervention services work in other states. And we believe the pay and chase model is the way to go. We also believe that, as we put in here, that hybrid sort of hub model is also the way to go. But we know that we need to dig deeper into the details to make sure that we are not making recommendations that we don't have enough data on. So that's why we're trying to get all the way through this. We did a lot of work in a very few months' time.
So the division's only role in this is going to be helping y'all determine how much money y'all need in that bank.
Yes, and, we have a pretty good idea, and we just need enough so that we can fund the invoice payments for at least 6 months. By then, the cash flow should be coming in to us instead of the providers to refill the bank.
And this funding in the bank, it's going to be independent of Medicaid funds. The funds we give y'all for case management won't go into this bank.
That's separate.
So all of that's going to be separate to where any
The
funding
initial-
you have is either from general appropriations or from whatever federal dollars y'all have.
The initial funding of the bank is the Payer Last Resort grant money, and the state appropriation right now is $2 million that is appropriated directly for provider use. And then the difference in what that will be to cover 6 months of invoices. That number is still fluid, but
So hypothetically, how this would look like, we have this bank set up, provider render service. If they don't charge us, they end up charging y'all, but they should have charged us. Y'all pay out, then y'all recoup from us. Is that how it would work?
it would be we would be the formal billing agent for all providers. So we would work directly with y'all as one-on-one instead of having 50 providers working individually. You would be getting the invoices from the health department for providers services that have already been reimbursed. And then if you aren't paying it, then we pivot to the grant as payer of last resort.
So y'all end up as the billing agent for all of these
Yes.
providers?
Yes.
And they're right now are they performing service on y'all's behalf? Like, I guess I'm just making sure we probably need a work through all of that between y'all and us since since some
Sure.
of that money's gonna be flowing through us, because
Yeah.
I can see some little intricacies of that relationship. I'm assuming that what y'all pay providers now, it's the same rate as what Medicaid pays.
No, in fact, I think I'd have to get Chris to confirm. I believe the payer of last resort, even after the 20% increase that I ordered, is still below Medicaid. Is that right? It's payer of last resort funding is not market rate or anything close to it, which is why we need to eliminate this hurdle that's getting in the way of providers wanting to serve the EIP.
So we end up with, the Department of Health as pretty much the collector of all the fees and then
Yes.
distributing them.
Which will not go into agency funds. It stays in the early intervention bank.
Okay, so again, Cody, this is one of those things, that's why we have recommended that we also have a continued task force and this exchange, because we know there's more to work out. But basically, the bottom line is that the health department would be essentially the bank, almost like a university medical system works. We as providers get paid whether or not the money is collected on our patients. We may not get paid as much eventually if money is not collected on our patients, but we get paid so we can continue to work and have a job and feel stable in the job. And that's what we're trying to do for our early intervention providers. And to do that, this pay and chase model seems to be the best way, so that people who should be spending their time treating patients, treating these young children, are not spending their time trying to manage the finances of it all. Okay, so I think we can probably move on. And again, Cody, I think part of the issue is you did not have the benefit of the several months of discussion as we were going through trying to research what some of the major problems were about the system. And this was really one of them.
I'll just say, like, and I guess the devil's always in the details with this, and I get very antsy, especially dealing with federal funds, and I'm sure you do as well, because of all the repercussions that can come from it. But I guess we're likely be very reserved on supporting something like this till we see how it's going to look. Because again, I can think of so many questions coming through from this format about recoveries and things like that. So I don't know if the division could, and again, our support is not relevant to the recommendations of this committee, but I think we're going to have to really keep an eye on the devil in these and how this is structured.
And again, we're following the model of other states that are already doing it.
Right. And I think how it ultimately looks is what hopefully the coming year will show us.
And then Dr. Buttress, it's all predicated on being able to fund the bank, as we all know. We are already working on looking at internal processes on payer of last resort, which is the only thing we control, and making sure that that's as efficient as it possibly can be to shorten whatever that time window has been down to the shortest amount that
Right.
it can be.
Right. Perfect. And obviously, whatever is set up, I think our task force all agrees that we know this may be some sort of phase-in process. Again, to be decided. One thing we do know is there need to be additional funds coming in to early intervention services. And you see the numbers of the total eventually, but the recommendation is to phase it in over some years, because we also know that there are lots of people going to the coffers asking for additional monies. And what we're trying to do is come up with a reason. What we tried to do was come up with a reasonable amount that would be doable over several years. So Any other points that anyone would like to bring up? Please do. This is a good time.
Yes, this is Keith, and I would like to kind of touch on the Medicaid and the pay and chase model because my company kind of runs sort of a pay and chase. I personally pay my 35 or 40 therapist out of my bank, and then I chase the insurance and then down to the Polar and the billing through the state. The biggest obstacle that we're having through Medicaid is the length of time to get our provider number set up in the beginning. And if there was a modifier maybe that could exempt early intervention for prior authorizations would be wonderful because the children already go through an intensive evaluation that determines their deficits. And I don't understand why we need another prior authorization to prove their deficits when we've already done that in the lead time. I think a modifier might be a better answer to help this run smoother if that's something that Medicaid can do. I'm not sure if it is or not. But that's one of the larger obstacles in my smaller phase of pay and chase for my company.
Who was the, you mentioned that determination was made before and then you have to do a PA. Who makes that original determination?
The evaluation teams for the early intervention program.
Who's those evaluation teams under? Is that, because I know that's not a Medicaid entity.
No, it's a combination of the referring provider and then the early intervention program. And I agree. I think this is a great example of where prior authorization is just an unnecessary hurdle and burden towards payment. You know,
Right,
it just
and delays,
it
yeah.
in this instance, it achieves nothing. And it costs Medicaid more money to go through it when it's unnecessary.
And again, I wouldn't mind looking at some of these codes, and especially the ones that are PA'd. I do know using a separate entity that's not under contract or an agent of the division to make utilization determinations, I'd have to check, see if that complies with federal law on utilization management. I don't see that just being used as a replacement while still doing that, but I wouldn't mind looking at some of those codes that are PA'd if you've got that list. Dr. Edney, could you get me that list?
I think we can get that pretty easily, but Cody, I want to remind you that this is a federal program. Early intervention, the First Steps program is a federal program that is administered by the state and partially in a small way funded by the state, but it's predominant federal dollars that drive everything.
I'm not really familiar with a lot of the CFRs around early intervention or whether or not they're similar to the Medicaid CFRs, but again, we have our own laws we have to follow. So looking at all that stuff, I do want to make sure that we're staying consistent with the Medicaid rules.
And we'll be, you know, that's great where two state agencies can work together just to work it out. And the division's been great working with us. So no complaints here, but this is, I mean, Keith brings up a great point. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of Medicaid resources, and it's a burden towards payment for our providers. It hinders children getting timely access to treatment.
And again, what you have in comparing Mississippi to a lot of other states is a lot of these agencies that are predominantly in these fields are actually under the same umbrella. Unfortunately, in Mississippi, we kind of divided up to where Department of Health its own entity, Medicaid's its own entity, and we have our different. So that does create some of its own operational issues about us coordinating on some of this. But I do think the Department of Health and Medicaid has done the yeoman's work of trying to figure out how to make all this work together. So again, we're happy to figure out ways to do it. We just have to make sure that because of how that's structured and because we are separate entities, ultimately our agency is responsible for our federal funds, just like your agency is responsible for yours.
Yeah, and the only point I'm making is that by the time the children are deemed eligible to be in early intervention, they're compliant with the federal program that they need services. I think that should trump a prior authorization, especially from a CCO.
Can I make a suggestion that we contact one of the other states where we know that this is operating a little bit more smoothly? Because I just can't imagine this issue hasn't come up before that one of the other states has not worked through.
Right, and certainly Tennessee and Alabama, on either, around us, not either side, both have worked through some of these issues, so we can get back with them. Emily, I know you've done a lot of research on that, but yeah, I do know that they don't all have one centralized division or department just for young children. I think a couple of states have tried that, but I think there is interfacing between the different departments. And it should work. And I understand, I think, the ensuring that providers become Medicaid providers is something that has been an issue. And I don't have absolute fact on this. I know other providers do, who have been in the trenches on the early intervention work, but it's the process seems to take long.
Keith, I know, I asked earlier when I saw that, and it's about the enrollment for the issues with enrollment providers. I know I was asking, Mary Claire and them for, more information on that, but if you've got my email from some of those emails we've all exchanged, I wouldn't mind getting a little bit more insight in that.
Okay, that will be great.
Thank you, Keith. Any other comments?
Hi, this is Denise. I had one question about page 43, where it talks about outreach, education, and community awareness. I've heard it mentioned a couple of times about regaining the trust of providers and was wondering if that falls under that section and if we're essentially in the still processing phases of how to do that, or if we have any plans of action on how to regain the trust within the provider community, just given ongoing changes, or if that's something we're going to think a little bit more about after we have the additional recommendations.
Under finding number 7, MSDH needs to identify ways to increase outreach, education, and community awareness for their early intervention program. So yes, to your point, Denise, I think that the full intent of that is to make sure that the communities are well informed on how to access and what services are available, et cetera. And I think, again, we put that in the hands of the health department to work toward that. I know several years ago, I often, as a provider, would receive letters reminding us of services being available and all that. Well, snail mail is not our primary mode of communication anymore. So I think to just relook at all that and to make sure we left it fairly open-ended. We tried not to make things so specific that it would box anybody in, but to say we know that better outreach and education needs to happen, and left it at that for the health department to make more determination on that.
Thank you.
I think if I can speak, not perhaps for Dr. Edney, but for the state ICC, we have a public health awareness or public awareness on the state ICC subcommittee that would be perfect to work on this. If Dr. Edney agrees, then we can discuss this in more detail with between you, Dr. Edney, and the state ICC.
Dr. Hennington, I think that's a great idea. And, as I have committed to you and the other ICC members that, the health department is going to work closely with you to the full benefit of, for this program.
Thank you, Carlin.
You're welcome. I think it's a good point, and I think it's a perfect point that we can work on within the state ICC, and then monitor our effectiveness as well.
Agree. Any other thoughts? Okay. Well, I think we're probably ready to vote to approve the early intervention task force report. So I'd like to call for a vote on that.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move that we accept this report as presented.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second, Biz Harris.
Okay, thank you, Biz. Okay, I'll approve. If you would, if you're online, if you would just put yes or in, yes, I see some thumbs up or hands up, all approved. Approve. Are there any individuals opposed? I see a lot of thumbs up. Okay. Are we good? Right. Our next question is to Dr. Edney. Dr. Edney, we believe that we need a home for our task force report to reside, and we would like to ask if the health department's website could be the host site for it to reside. Would that be okay?
It would be more than okay. In fact, I think we can build out a section related to, the whole work for early intervention moving forward, so that we have FAQs, as we
Right.
move into the transition and be a repository for information. And I think we could probably also incorporate ICC reports and things like that, anything related to this program.
Thank you. And then I'd just like to say to our task force members and our advisors, once our task force report is on the health department website, Dr. Edney, if you could let all of our task force members know, or let us know, and we'll send an email out to everyone. If you want to share a link on your particular websites, I know many of you have your own at your organizations or your institutions. And so I think it would be great to go ahead and link this work. I think, again, as chair, I want to thank each and every one of you who have participated. I've seen a lot of great energy and commitment to this. And also to thank Pierre so very much, Ted Booth and Mary Claire Ringer and Emily Cloyce, all three have just been invaluable. And thank you all. But, and I think we need to be proud of this. And I think our point in the ultimate statement on this is that we're not done yet. We know we're not done yet. There's more work to do, but we've made some pretty great inroads, and hope that this energy continues. And I hope all of you will stay committed in one way or another. Now, we did make the recommendation that the task force would continue, but effectively it can't continue. It will have to start again. there will have to be legislation for that again. And so we hope our legislator champions will help us move that forward. I don't know if there are any other comments that anybody would like to make before we close. I'm not hearing anything, so I'd like to hear a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved, Dr. Edney. Is there a second?
Denise, a second.
Okay, thank you, Denise. All right, I don't think we need to vote on that. We will adjourn, and thank you again to everyone.